Well, and you think about for the Dallas Cowboys, and Jerry Jones said on the radio up in Dallas, that one seed is in play.
Yeah.
We've got to go after it. We've got to go get it. But for all the things to happen, there's a chance, but
it's a slim one.
It is. Let's talk about it. Jane Slater from the NFL Network joining us now on the Blitz. Jane, before we get into the game this week, what was it like today at the facility? The first time, from what I understand, that media has been allowed to talk to players since we all witnessed what we did on Monday night.
Look, obviously it was on their minds heading into the game, but I think Micah Parsons, said it the way I think probably we expected it. A lot of these players know that how violent this sport can be and how dangerous it is. And it's unfortunate to watch something like that, and their thoughts and prayers are obviously with them. I got the sense, and we talked about this before, I don't know how many of them actually watched it in real time. In other words, some of them I think probably caught it on social and they watched the follow-up highlights. But when I was talking to some of these guys, and I could be wrong on this, but I just got the sense that they weren't watching it in real time the way maybe some of us were. They did talk about it today. They had the team, chaplain there, and Mike McCarthy's really big on mental health. And by the way, Quadri Allison, who is, fourth on the depth chart, running back, he played at Pittsburgh with Damar Hamlin. So it was hitting a lot more close to home, obviously. He even told me they were texting a couple of weeks ago about one of his game day fit. Damar thought it looked fire, and he flew up to Buffalo, or not to Buffalo, but he flew up to his draft party and was super excited for him because Quadre is from Buffalo and Hamlin got drafted there. And so that's been hard on him. And he and his teammates have been texting like crazy and waiting for updates. And he told me his nickname was Neighborhood Hero because he just literally personifies everything that is Pittsburgh, put on your hard hat, the blue collar worker. And he said that's why he thought that Hamlin was going to survive this, because of how he just makes things happen, how he's just, he's just that type of guy. And so I think we got a little bit more personal with Quadre today. And then Jabril Cox, who didn't speak to us, they were pre-draft work partners. So there was that personal connection. But I think hitting all of them is a reminder is how precious.
Jane's phone, Jane, your phone is cutting in and out, but I know it is a reminder, especially when you're young, you're athletic, you feel invincible, that life is very precious, and you might not be as invincible as you thought you were.
Correct. And so I think that was sort of the tone of today, but they were back on the practice field. Tony Pollard returned to practice, which was good. Leighton Vander Esch got some reps in. And I don't get the sense that they're planning on sitting any of their starters, because I heard you guys before you came.
All right.
Meeting, which is at 5 now. They still have a chance at 1 or 2.
Yeah, they do. And Jane, Jason and I were talking about it earlier, that I would assume that Mike McCarthy is going to have somebody, one person, watching that scoreboard during the game, that Philadelphia game. And if that Philadelphia game gets out of hand or something, I could see McCarthy maybe making some big time substitutions at that point in time.
Possibly, but I did ask Mike. I said, so do you guys have somebody on staff that's giving you updates on the sidelines while you're playing this game? He said, nah, we're going to play through the whistle. The focus is on beating Washington.
Wow. Interesting. He says that, but you got to wonder about that, right? I mean, I don't know, maybe.
I'd want to know. That's me. But
yeah.
Also sometimes the knowing, you sort of take your foot off the gas pedal, and then if you're not careful, that's also how injuries happen, right? So
yeah.
I think it's probably better just to not know and then see how it all washes out at the end of the game. I was shocked that the Saints beat the Eagles last weekend.
Yeah, no kidding.
I think we all were,
yeah.
And I think that's one of the reasons why we keep hearing about, is Jalen going to play this weekend? But I got to believe, even if you're at halftime, if Mike McCarthy truly time and you hear that the Eagles are up 21 or 28 points, do you say, Cooper, get ready, the second half is yours?
I I don't know. Because like I said, we've seen games turn too. When you get to the third and fourth quarter. I mean, look at the Cowboys. You've seen that in that Colts game. So I don't know if that's the strategy. And to that end, I think it's important for this team to really get some momentum. And they just kept talking about how ugly of a game that Tennessee game, and it was. I was there.
Yeah.
It was ugly. I mean, this was against a guy that literally had been in Tennessee for 8 days, and you continue to make this difficult on yourself. It was a messy game, but I think they know that they need to clean up a lot of things to feel a lot more confident and have some momentum heading into the postseason. Because if they find themselves playing Tom Brady, this team hasn't beat Tom Brady yet. Like he's a tough, and look, I know that the Bucs don't look like a tough team this year, but that's like we were saying, what's the boogeyman in the postseason? I'm like, I don't know if it's a team that's a boogeyman, but there are certain players, Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady, feel like boogeymen to me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, they are boogeyman. And in the playoffs, they get even scarier, and that's the problem. Jane, what was the final decision on James Washington and why the Cowboys made the decision to let him go?
Stephen Jones says it all the time, availability. You can't make the club if you're in the tub. And, unfortunately, he was injured a lot of the season, and they got T.Y. Hilton there. And then I think it also becomes a numbers game because, you've got offensive line that you're going to need some depth, pull up some guys likely. There's just so many other positions that have been injured. You were carrying all these wide receivers, and James wasn't doing it. And for that matter, before he was injured, didn't see much from camp. And it was one of those annoying names like people would bring up on the podcast. And I don't mean to show the guy disrespect, but he didn't really do anything in Pittsburgh either before he came here. And so I just didn't know why we continued talking about James Washington. If James Washington was someone they felt good about, they wouldn't have gone out and gotten T.Y. Hilton, and we never would have talked about OBJ. So, or even entertained Brandon Cooks with the Houston Texans. So I think it was to be expected. I'm going to be real interested to see what they do with Jalen Tolbert at some point. When are we going to see anything from that guy?
Yeah, at this point, a bust from the draft, although who's to say he in next year or a year after, kind of like Noah Brown, has taken a long time, finally become that guy. I'm just impressed with what T.Y. Hilton has been able to come in and do as quickly as he's been able to do it in the locker room when you've had a chance to talk with him and watch him interact with his teammates. I mean, he just looks like a total pro, but a guy that fits with what the Cowboys wanted, what they talked about, what they wanted with OBJ, but they're getting it from T.Y. Hilton with that veteran presence.
They have sort of fallen. I mean, Jason Peters was such a lucky fall into, right? And then to go out and get T.Y. Hilton, who was getting calls from other teams, to come in here, learn the playbook as quickly as he did. And as he told me, he goes, I'm never out of shape. All I ever do is run. He's like, it's all about speed for me. And so when you see that in a game and they've slowly brought him on, I mean, we've seen Mike McCarthy do this with a lot of the guys that they bring off the street. They slowly ease them in, but I just don't get a sense that he's not ready for even more on his plate. And I don't know if he's my only third down guy. Like, I feel like this is a tip of the house guy. So, I anticipate they're going to go to T.Y. a lot. And particularly, if you look at his postseason numbers, he is really good in the postseason, T.Y. Hilton. And so, I think Dak's gotten to a point where he really trusts him. You've got to trust the guy if you're going to him on some of those third downs. And he's even embraced his nickname right now, Mr. Third Down. I think he's been a great addition. I think they got lucky. And I think at the end of the day, it's probably a good thing that OBJ didn't work out.
I agree with that. I think it is too, because, I mean, first and foremost, he might not have been available for the Cowboys this year, and that's when they need him. And so it's working out well with T.Y. Jane, I want to ask you about Dak Prescott. And obviously Dak is Dak, and he's not showing anything, but he continues to throw interceptions. What are they saying around there, if anything, there at the Star?
He seems fairly unbothered by it, and so does everyone else. I think the only people that are bothered about it are the people that cover the team or some of the fans. But he is right. Like, if you go back and look at some of these interceptions, they're not all on Dak. And so I think it's just a combination of some of the, I think every interception, as he told me a couple weeks ago, does have a story. But, man, it is really frustrating when you see the frequency that he's turned the ball over this season as opposed to the past. But he also had a more reliable wide receiver in Amari Cooper in the past. He also didn't have an offensive line that's moving 3 guys when one gets injured. And so I think that there's some levels of that that are coming into play here that tell a story. And, I was joking about this today. I'm like, the Cowboys are so funny. This 12-win team that we're so heavily scrutinizing, but yet you've also got the Vikes. Kirk Cousins is tied for just as many interceptions as Dak. They're both 12-win teams. That's what's crazy.
It is, and again, and you hear it all the time as we visit with Jane Slater from the NFL Network, as we do here on our show, and Joe, will text in the group, Dak throws a interception, an elite quarterback. And then you look at the numbers, like 22 of 27, 300 some odd yards, couple of touchdowns, but it's those 2 interceptions. And, that's the one thing you get into the playoffs. Can this team overcome an interception or 2 from Dak Prescott?
They can, because we've seen him do it in games, right? Like, what was the game right after the Jacksonville game? He ended the game with a pick 6 interception. Like, oh my gosh. And then the very next game they come out, what was it, Philly? He throws an interception on the opening drive and then continues to battle through that game. Like, I think the thing that would concern more people around that building is if the interceptions were beginning to get into his head, then that would be a problem. But I don't think he's like a Carson Wentz that's broken. I think they're interceptions, their stories. I'm not making excuses for Dak, but he does. His mental resilience sometimes impresses me. I mean, honestly, covering him for the last 7 years, some of the stuff that he's been through personally and even just in-game adversity, he's really impressive with how mentally resilient he is. And sometimes I even look to him and go, how can I be a little bit more mentally resilient? Because I don't know how the guy does that. And so I think that's why it doesn't really concern the building. And I understand some of your listeners and fans will say, well, what about in the postseason? Can they overcome it? I don't have answers to those questions. I do know that it does feel like this team has been able to overcome a lot. And they've literally not had back-to-back losing games this year. And that says a lot to me about this team. And given all the injuries, there's not one position on this team that hasn't been affected by an injury this season.
Yeah, you're right about that. And they have been resilient, and hopefully they will continue that as we move into the postseason. Jane, I've got to ask you this question. You may or may not know the answer, and that's cool. On the network, have you guys talked about, or has there been any indication as to what's going to happen with the Buffalo Bills and the Cincinnati Bengals as we move forward from here on out?
No idea, and that's one thing I wouldn't dare speculate on.
Gotcha.
I know that they had conference calls today, and I think they're at least discussing it right now. But I have no new information on that.
Gotcha.
We're all waiting to find out. And again, just such a odd situation, unprecedented. There's a playbook for just about everything, and they don't have one for this. And hopefully we never have to create one and use it again. Jane Slater with the NFL Network. It's cool. Next week we're talking about the playoffs.
Absolutely.
I love it. It felt like both a long season and a short one all at the same time. But man, there have been all sorts of plot twists as it's related to the Cowboys this year. That's for sure.
Always. That's why they're America's team. Jane Slater. Make sure you're following her on Twitter at Slater NFL. Jane, we'll talk to you next week.
Look forward to it. Bye, guys.
Appreciate it. The great Jane Slater from the NFL Network. Next week when we talk to her, it'll be about Tampa Tom and the Buccaneers.
Tampa Tom and the Buccaneers, or will it be about somebody else? Will it be talking about a bye week for the Dallas Cowboys?
So now you're saying there's a chance?
I'm just saying.
You're coming around?
I'm just throwing out all the scenarios.